thanks to each of you for your service to our country, for all you do to keep us safe. It's deeply appreciated by me, my colleagues, and my constituents back at home. My first question goes both to Secretary Hagel and to General Dempsey. The former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mullen, made a statement in 2011 that people on both sides of the aisle and across America have quoted many times since then. And I'd like to repeat it because it's something that I think needs to be repeated often. He said, quote, "I've said many times that I believe the single biggest threat to our national security is our debt. So I also believe we have every responsibility to help eliminate that threat," close quote. Do you both agree with that statement today when our national debt is significantly larger than it was in 2007?
I agree
2011?
Yes.
You do? Okay.
I do, yes.
Yeah, I've always pointed out, but I can't tell you how many times that quote has been read to me, so thanks for reminding me again. But look, economics, our fiscal situation, the deficit, the budget are all threats to our security. But there's a lot of physical, seen and unseen threats out there that perhaps are different even from when Admiral Mullen made that comment. So I do align myself with the economic piece of it, but there are just groups out there that also threaten us.
So you wouldn't necessarily say it is the single biggest threat? But
no.
Okay. Thank you. You know, it is important for us, I think, to remember that the President's budget, despite proposing pretty significant tax increases, would still contemplate adding about $2.5 trillion to a total debt held by the public and by the time he leaves office in 2017. And then by 2021, our payments, just our interest payments on our debt, will be larger than our defense outlays. So it was for this reason that several weeks ago during the Senate budget debates, I put forward an amendment that would prohibit us from getting into a position where we are spending or contemplating spending more money on interest on our debt than we are on defense. I was happy that we got bipartisan support for that, at least narrow bipartisan support. I think we had all Republicans voting for it and one Democrat. But the budget that is in the best interest of our national security is one that balances, one that gets to a balance and is able to turn off the sequester by focusing not just on cutting disproportionately out of our defense spending, but on spending as a whole, on the whole project. To that end, and consistent with following up on something Senator Vitter was asking, if the sequester is not turned off, the sequester or its some would say that there are spending caps moving forward into future years covered by the Budget Control Act. Will we continue to see budgets that ignore these provisions, that ignore the sequestration provisions? Can we expect budgets like that to continue to be sent to Congress that don't reflect the law, that is the Budget Control Act of 2011? Secretary Hagel?
The FY 215 budget that we will next present early next year will reflect the reality of whatever the situation is. I don't know if between now and next February, if the Congress and the President are able to come together with some deficit reduction plan. I know the Congress has worked very hard on it, both parties. The President has. I know everyone was hopeful. But as you suggest, the law of the land is the law of the land, and that's the reality.
Right.
So that'll be the budget that is presented.
Okay, that's great, and that's why we're surprised when it didn't reflect it this time around. But I'm happy to hear that it will reflect the law of the land next time around. Mr. Secretary, you announced last month the addition of that 15 additional ground-based interceptors will be deployed to Alaska as a reaction to the provocations that we've had from North Korea. This brings the numbers of GBIs in Alaska to the number that was originally planned during the Bush administration, I believe, was later reduced by President Obama. I have a question for you about this. Was the Russian government consulted or informed that the United States was considering this decision before that decision was made, and if so, when did that occur?
Well, the answer is not to my knowledge. It was not, the Russian government was not consulted in any way, and it was not, that decision, that policy was not decided based on any consideration of the Russian government. Incidentally, I would just add that those GBIs also not only in Fort Greely, Alaska, but some are in Vandenberg, California.
Okay. So to your knowledge, they were not consulted, and if the Department were to decide that additional missile defense systems were needed to be deployed for the protection of the United States, whether domestically or abroad, would the Russian government be consulted or informed before that decision was made?
Well, first, I can't answer for the President. That would be a decision for the President to make. It would, I suspect, have to revolve around treaty obligations that we have with the Russians and other issues like that.
Okay. In March, the Russian government requested that some meetings take place regularly to discuss plans with the European missile shield. Are there any plans for those talks to take place? And if there are plans for such talks, will these include any of our NATO allies as part of those discussions?
Again, Senator, I don't know about those talks. That would be in the purview of the Secretary of State in the White House. I have not been consulted on any talks or the possibility of what you're talking about.
Okay. You're not certain of whether there have been talks of those talks, but to your knowledge, there have not.
To answer your question, I don't know of any conversations about what you suggested about resuming talks.
Okay.
On the basis that you laid it out.
Okay. I see my time has expired. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Lee.